When we're talking about European geography, we're starting small. Europe is a rather small place. It can be traveled easily today with the help of modern technology. But in the medieval period, sometimes labeled the Dark Age, most peasants never traveled more than 2 miles from the place where they were born. In France, there are rolling hills and forests. In the Holy Roman Empire, HRE, which is present day Germany, there are dense forests, steep mountains, and beautiful lakes. Spain is a bit more arid with less stark mountains, but is beautiful nonetheless. England is a low-lying land that is noted for being a maritime climate, which means quite a bit of cloudy days and rain at random times. The landscape lent itself to farming. The manorial system was the system of choice, where peasant farmers lived outside of large fortresses, later beautiful castles made of stone and timbers, and toiled away in fear of wars and cruel lords who were some of the original gangsters, like Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince, and posed the question, is it better to be loved or feared? This continues on by saying that feared is the better option. So when you're looking at the Middle Ages, some of the things you're looking at here is Europe geographically, so I've included the actual geography in a map. We're saying that it's going to start small. This is the manorial system right here, so I've included a picture about that, and then I've dropped in some text here. This is the Lord's house. This is the wheat field. The Neolithic Revolution has yielded the ability to grow grains and make them bigger and have more yields. The peasants, this is their homes. They would have a small garden piece that they would try and subsist off of. They would be responsible for working the land. They're not slaves, and they're certainly not owned, but they're definitely not free. Peasants are tied to the land. Here are some more fields out here. If you look at these peasant homes, they would be responsible for working the fields. The central portion of every medieval center is the church. It could be the fortress originally. It's the stronghold. It's where people get all of their information, and it's how they deal with right living. So it's a very, very key location. The mill is the next location that's key. All of the grain loads up on these wagons, is taken to the mill. In order to actually digest the grain and eat the grain, it has to be ground into flour so that you can make bread out of it. One of the interesting things about this is that the peasants pay taxes in grain. So the Lord has the taxes from the peasants, who then has to pay it to the king. In the system of feudalism, they are given this land, this manorial system, the Lord is, in exchange for taxes and military service. So you set this up, you have these peasants, here's the blacksmith, here's some more fields, and essentially what happens then is this is the farming system. This is how Europe is able to create a surplus. And when we talk about Europe, we're not necessarily talking about Europe, we're talking about the Holy Roman Empire, we're talking about France, we're talking about England, we're talking about Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Italy is not even running yet. It's mostly part of the Holy Roman Empire. So, if Mr. Daniels will stop rambling and get back on track, the system was backed by the Roman Catholic Church, who encouraged people to suffer on earth and reap their rewards in heaven. So essentially, this life is horrible. They are supposed to suffer. Some of the things that we get from this system is that marriages were arranged through the use of dowry payment for marriage at this time to ensure people did not fall on the social hierarchy. There are not so much arranged marriages today, but what we do is the bride's family usually ends up paying for the wedding, or the bride herself. That's one of the customs that we picked up. One of the things that we've kind of let fall by the wayside is the farming families. The nice thing about Glogster is when you throw a picture in here, you click on it, it can become big for everybody to see. This is a 1914 farming family, and as you can see, there are tons of them. This one family could probably work the farm by themselves. So that's key. The next thing is crop rotation. When we look at this, they came up with a system so that their crops were less likely to fail. In year one, in one field, you would plant roots, brassicas, and others. In year two, they're going to plant others, roots, and brassicas. In year three, they're going to do brassicas, others, and roots. This is usually a rotation of turnips. So a root crop is a turnip. The brassicas are going to be like your cabbages, your broccolis, your Brussels sprouts, and then your others are going to be your grains. The thing about this system is that there's 1 year where you leave the field fallow, which means that you don't plant anything there. Currently, we usually rotate between beans and corn here in the Midwest. So crop rotation is key. One of the things that they didn't do a lot of was fertilizing. So if you were able to come up with a fertilizing system, you were much further ahead than what they were. The peasants or subjects are on the bottom of the social structure. They had very few rights and large amounts of responsibilities. They were expected to do work on the farm and oftentimes starved to death because of the Lord taxing their grain. Disease was common, but none as common as the Black Death. This was a disease named because the black rat, down here, was thought to have carried the disease, when in actuality the rat simply carried the fleas that carried the disease. Death was so prominent that crosses were erected on the tallest mountains, villages were wiped out, and children played Ring Around the Rosie to help them remember the symptoms and signs of the plague. Essentially, if you were bitten by a flea, which most people had fleas if they lived in these peasant conditions, you would get a red bump, and then around the red bump would be a black kind of cloudy ring. That's the ring around the rosy. And whenever you got ring around the rosy, then your fingers would start to turn to ashes, your outer appendages, so ears and nose, that's going to start to turn ashy because of a lack of circulation and the disease itself, and then everyone falls down when the plague comes to your village. So be aware of those signs and stay away, children. The next thing is that there are long wars. For example, there's the 100 Years' War between France and England. There's the 30 Years' War between France and Spain, where Rome was almost sacked by the Spanish mercenaries, and this led to large death tolls for the peasants. So you're seeing a lot of death and a lot of people laying around after these battles. Finally, there's some positives from the plague. Because so many people died and their peasants were so heavily needed, they were able to negotiate better terms, and eventually exploration and crusades led to the revival of the classics, philosophy, literature, and history. This renewed interest in the classics, which led to a period which we will call the Renaissance and eventually the Reformation. So even though times were hard and they were not as good as they may have been in the Roman times, what we do see is because of the situations, disease and war, people are going to gain back some rights and get rid of some responsibilities. And we'll talk further about the Magna Carta when it comes time.